Good afternoon everyone. Welcome back to our next session. This session's speaker is Mr. J.P. Patra. He is working as Scientist D in Surface Water Hydrology Division at National Institute of Hydrology, Roorkee. He'll be talking on flood risk management under climate change. He has a lot of expertise in this area and I'm sure you'll benefit from his talk. So please start your talk.
Okay, so good afternoon. So we'll start this lecture on flood risk management with special little bit emphasis on climate change. Now, this outline of this lecture is basically first we'll try to identify and try to quantify what is our basically flood. Then this next approach is how we will going to manage this flood. And in between that, or this recent development, instead of managing flood, how we can move from risk management. So flood management to how we deal with this flood risk management. We'll also showcase some of the case studies that we have carried out here. So that will be benefited to you, and you can ask more about those case studies or how we can do those things. Now coming into this general definition or what we generally understood by flood. So this anyway we all are experiencing flood every year some way or other way. So we generally say that flood means that is the submergence of a land which is generally dry. Means generally that part of the land is dry throughout the year, but in some case it is submerged by water. So this is what we define basically as a flood. However, if we try to little bit more put thought into that, it is basically we generally consider the flood as a state of high water level along the river channel. Sometimes that is what we generally get from news or what we generally do in our calculations or modeling exercise. We simulate or we try to predict or we analyze the state of higher water level in a river channel, and sometimes on the coast also that sea level rise and climate change you will be dealing with, and you have some lectures on that also. So in the coastal area, that may be sea level rise, storm surge, or maybe backwater effect. So that could also lead to inundation of land, like tsunami in case. So anyway, in those cases, there is a some sort of higher water level which is generally higher than our normal water level, and sometimes we fix them. These water levels are like danger level, warning level, or you may be listening like HFL or highest flood level. So these are the levels, or these are some kind of quantification that we try to see. Now, this general philosophy when we try to deal with these floods, what comes is like any as a natural climatic or like any other disaster. It is like when we say like a act of God, or that there is a like fighting between man against nature. In this case, what we see in this part, like when we talk about this aspect, so this is like a gray area. Means it is like an act of God or it is like a natural phenomenon, and we cannot do anything about these things. So in this case, what we are trying to say or trying to avoid our any role or our responsibility towards managing those things. Now the second thought comes on this area, basically what we call our like flood fighting, in flood defense kind of thing, flood prevention like construction of embankment and anything, whatever the things what we try to do in this category, we try to just a minute. Sorry for the disturbance. So what we try to do in these kinds of thing is basically we try to, instead of managing or the looking at the flood as a holistic way, we just try to manage the quantum of water and we try to keep that water away from our property or human behavior, human settlements or things. So we are trying to basically manage or the flood water or flood volume through reservoir, through embankment, through diversion. So these are kinds of like our, till now these are the measures what mainly focused on. The recently now we are moving towards this category of like social responsibility, and instead of flood fighting, we call this as a flood risk management. So in this case, we try to incorporate apart from these flood volume, the vulnerability aspect and the stakeholders who are susceptible to this flood. Similarly, the involvement of community awareness and all these happenings, this climate change, of course, is one added uncertainty or factor into this whole phenomenon. Now, what we generally try to do, or in these lectures, what you are dealing with, like a lot of modeling work. So basically, what happens, like this is this climate forecasting or climate forecast. Generally, that comes from historical data, satellite observations, and lot of these numerical weather forecasting model. So that comes as a input to our whole system. With this, we do some kinds of our rainfall runoff modeling, or you can say that it's basically a hydrologic modeling. In this case, you are doing this big model. Some people may be doing SWOT, HETHMS, or some kind of conceptual models or graded model. So, but you do some kind of rainfall runoff modeling, and in higher mountains, if there is a snow cap, so you consider this component of snow also. But generally, it is a, in third case, it is basically governed by this rainfall and runoff phenomenon. Now, what happens in this case, if you want to go a certain kind of outflow hydrograph or at desired location, you get a discharge hydrograph, and you want to study the how this flood water or that quantum of water flow in the river and surrounding floodplains. We try to take these kinds of hydrodynamic model, which takes the topography into consideration, be it one-dimensional or a two-dimensional hardship modeling. Like one, HECRAS is freely available and widely used, along with that Mike suit is there, and SOBEC. So a lot of models are also available. So that we want to study these our phenomena in the river and floodplain. And when it comes into urban drainage, so we may be used like SWMM, SWIM, or micro-urban kind of things, so study the behavior of urban drainage system. It is a little bit different compared to the our basically what we call this riverine flood model, because this all this what we call this runoff that pass or travel sometimes through the open drainage and sometimes through our closed or the underground drainage system. So that flow dynamics is sometimes little bit different. And recent versions of this development of lot of models, they take both into the consideration. So we get considering all these modeling to finally some kinds of our flood inundation map. And of course, when we do some kind of regulation through reservoirs, that we may study independently, or there are modules available in your week also, so we can simulate these reservoir operations and how this flood can be managed or its impact can be reduced through operation of this reservoir. Then last part is this coastal flooding part, which personally I do not carry out much study on this. So again, because sometimes it basically forms the boundary conditions of our hydrodynamic model, but if you want to simulate this storm surge or tidal effect or a tsunami kind of event, then we have to carry out a detailed coastal model. Now coming from flood to flood risk, what we generally means understand by risk will be it a flood risk or any other risk. So that is basically hazard into consequence. So consequence is again derived from our exposure and vulnerability. So when we say flood risk, it is basically multiplication of our three terms, that is hazard, then the exposure and vulnerability. So all three has to be considered. Like hazard is basically, you can say the probability of flood, 5-year return period flood, 50-year or 100-year return period flood amount. So that flood is there. So that we express as our hazard. In consequence consists of these two terms, exposure and vulnerability combinedly. So that basically what would be the damage due to the hazard, that is the flood event. Like even there is a flood event, yet we have prepared our settlement and protected that through a proper embankment and proper drainage system. So there will be no exposure. So this flood is there, but our society or our people are not exposed to that flood, so we can prevent that. So our flood risk is reduced. Sometimes even we do not have that protection and these people are exposed, then there may be social vulnerability like low income group who are living near to the river with a, like you can say, single storage or a kacha house. They are more vulnerable compared to a multi-storage building or a, so that way this vulnerability also changes. So combining all these three, we expect the flood risk. And for a total, like for a city or for in a larger scale like a river basin, this flood risk can be expressed in a means monetary term, that is called as expected annual damage. So that is the average damage that could occur in a year in that basin. So obviously, when we talk about this expected annual damages, sometimes we try to segregate or it's like we cannot assign this monetary value to our human life loss. So we can say apart from this, all other are in a monetary term, that is expected annual damage, and this loss of life can be categorized in a different way. Now coming into these things, what are the major input required, or what are the considering we are like when we quantify this flood risk and we want to estimate this hazard, we require these kinds of our input data. So basically this first one is like precipitation. So that's our basic input to the system. Then water level for your model calibration or issuing a warning, we require river stages. So these are water level, discharge. Then obviously any land use changes, because when we do carry out modeling or we want to study for a period of time, so if the discharge or flood extent is changing with respect to our urbanization, that is land use changes, or deforestation that we want to estimate. So basically this hazard is magnitude of the event, and these are some of the factors of what we considered in our model. Now when we consider this other aspect, that is the exposure, again this is the land use, because the what kind of land use is exposed, it is urban, it is forest land, it is agricultural land. So those inputs are required. Then cost of properties and land and asset value. So these are some of the input data or input factors that we required for estimating or computing these parameters. Then as we have been discussing about this vulnerability aspect, that is the degree of damage and multiplied by its value. So it is more sort of a like our social aspect, like social indicators, how people are rich or how they are, the risk of perception means how they have been trained or how they are looking at the risk, like Very recently, in last 1 2 days, we have a cyclone warning in east coast of our country. So if people are trained there and they are being always evacuated, so the risk is reduced. So how their perception and how they look at the risk also reduce the vulnerability. Similarly, the awareness and behavior indicators, and these are means not very easy or not very means expressed in a mathematically it is quantifiable. So we try to quantify them sometimes in categorical wise, and there is a little bit greatness in quantifying this vulnerability aspect. Now we'll look at one example to this case. So let's say this is one simple example. So like say low flood. Low flood means the water level, if you consider flood as a water level, so a low water level in the river. So probability of occurrence of that is high, means like it's occur frequently. So this probability is high here, 0.8. And let's say the area or the extended area, flooding extent is that is somewhere, and these losses or these the basically damage related to that water level is expressed in this column. So this is basically here loss or damage. So it is 1,50,000. Let's see. So what happens now if you want to estimate the risk? We try to multiply this probability with that damage. So this way we estimate it. Similarly, like medium flood and high flood. So high flood means there is a high discharge in the water level. So probability of occurrence is there is low, and this total damage is of course high. But what we do, if we now look at the figures, we can see this middle one. This is the what we call this medium flood. We can see this medium flood is basically the maximum loss is in this category. You can see. So maybe when we try to deal with or try to manage with flood, we have to give more emphasis to these kinds of events. Now again, if you want to estimate this total or loss or total what is happening in this let's say river system or a river basin, so the sum of this is the probability of occurrence and this damage, and this whole sum is basically estimated annual damage. So on an average, this is our annual damage. Now if we look further into this, so like estimating this part, how this probability and what are the thought, how we can estimate, we'll go by this, what are the criteria available and what we are doing here. So basically this says like what we call design plot, that is based on the hydrologic design criteria. So for basically large storage, what we generally call dams, based on the storage capacity and what is the hydraulic head of that dam. The dams are classified into three categories: small, intermediate, and large. And this related flood what we consider is a 100-year flood for small dam. Then for intermediate dam, it is SPF, that is standard project flood. And for large dams, it is probable maximum flood for PMF. However, in practice, when we say that is the probable maximum flood, it means that it is the physical or limiting case. So the flood or this rainfall, it is PMP, will not have zero exceedance probability. And the other thing is what generally assumptions of this when we design the structure or design a flood diversion or flood mitigating dam, we think that this whatever this design flood is considered, it is constant over the design life of that structure, and that may be now challenged or that may not be very true if we consider this climate change aspect. Some other consideration like for barrages and wires, where we may require like for design case and for checking case, other return period flood, 50-year, 100-year or other case. Now next part, how we are using those to prevent this flood risk. These are some of the examples what I have shown here, like designing of a railway bridge. We try to make this bridge safe against 100-year return period flood. And for urban drainage, the system design we also do. Then for a river system, if you want to flood risk assessment, apart from these water levels, we require inundation extent, velocity, then time of arrival or warning time, and all these things we try to combine them. Now, what our general guidelines, what are being practiced in the country rather than what in the research domain. So the present practice approach, as we have can highlight here, those are basically based on some kinds of flood formula, that is basically empirical formula, then some kind of flood frequency analysis. But generally those are derived or general adapted from GB or little bit simplified Gumbel distribution. Now there is a need for like what our data set, they have uncertainty and the seasonality, all these things has to be looked into those, because there are a lot of dams, and recently a DREAP project has been taken up, and like more than 5,000 dams are there. Then how this design flood has been calculated and it is going to affect is being tested here. So instead of our present practice, then just briefly I will show how this general current practice it is done. In our whole country is divided into number of subzones, and each subzones we have prepared these kinds of. Central Water Commission has prepared this flood estimation report to estimate our flood. So these reports provide this concept of unit hydrograph, then what could be the like different return periods from precipitation value, then what could be the loss rate, and along with that what could be the base flow. Now just look at one such case. So this is example what I have shown here is, this is same amount of rainfall occurring in a 24 hour. So this total volume in 24 hour is fixed, and those are arranged in different ways. Here you can see this initially very high rainfall, then there is lesser rainfall. This is little bit reverse of that. So these are four kinds of arrangement of how the hourly arrangement has been taking place. And if you see here, I have just compared here this one taken from one case study. So you can see in the 24 hour from 0 to 24 hour one day, what percentage of rainfall occurring. So these are like, in this case we obtain this probable maximum precipitation case also. So in that case obviously this time distribution is little bit higher, otherwise almost 15 to 16 hours this maximum amount of rainfall occurs. So in this case we can see even if the same rainfall is there, so we can see there is a considerable, you can say here there is a considerable difference in this peak, or we can say this peak flood. So in climate change scenario or in any case when we try to estimate or try to deal with this kind of situation, so what kind of hourly distribution and how this arrangement are going to be in our case, that plays one greater role in deciding the peak flood. Then the next coming into is are called the PMP atlas, or probable maximum precipitation atlas, for all river basins of India. These have been prepared, and at various there are number of rainfall stations. So at each rainfall station, you can see here if you look at these are the various return period rainfall from up to 10,000 year return period, but we deal with generally 100 year or maybe 50 year. So in this case, it gives our estimated value, then a confidence bands also, that is the upper limit and lower limit. This way we can get our point rainfall value. Apart from that, you can see at every 1 degree, this is let's say 76 and 77 for Godavari basin. So at each grid, this probable maximum precipitation is also provided. So this can be used. Now, how this has been estimated, I will not go detail into that, but in this case, apart from this PMP value, this our statistical, this PMP are estimated both by statistical and our generalized method, or we can say physical method. Then in this case, what is not there, or we can say what we are lacking still in the reports is there is no allowance for like long-term climatic trends or subjected to change with climatic variation. So these are not incorporated readily into these kinds of atlas, and this may be case-to-case basis studied properly. Now the next part is like what we talk about this urban drainage system, or every city is now we see getting flooded. So recently this urban drainage manual is also prepared and it is available. It is prepared recently in 2019. So it also talks of combination of like in coastal area this design storm and this tailwater, what is sea level, we can say how it we can consider, and this intensity, duration, frequency curve for like various different periods. But again, like what we say, this case again I am taken from because it is not available for Indian condition. For in the HR Willingford, I have taken this case study. What they do, instead of doing a simple probability analysis, a joint probability of like this river discharge and at this coincidence or the same times if there is a high water level or storm change tidal effect. So these kinds of joint probability distributions if we do, then we may be able to take the proper design for our storm surge, because sometimes they are just like their high rainfall resulting into high discharge, similarly high tide or a storm surge, the coincidence of those two events at the same time is very catastrophic, so we can account for those also. Now as what we have been discussed, or the what we discussed and what is not available in our current practice. So that's also highlight one paper here. I have cited it. It what does it analyze the estimated design cloud of various dams at present scenario and compared it with the original design. So you can see in this case, like 70% of these dams, we found their design was inadequate. You can see here, in some cases, even the percentage increase in design flood is like more than 100%. Here it is max around 300%. So we can see, but sometimes this might have happened due to our what methodology what you have been used. Apart from that, the availability of the data at that time also plays a very important role, because sometimes we design the structure with limited data availability, and that also sometimes brings uncertainty into our final computation. But anyway, we can see there is a very high skewed or high kind of under designed our estimates, and there are lot of efforts going on to take corrective measures into that. However, this climate change is also playing one another uncertain or another parameter which need to be looked into. Now, as we have been saying, in this case, when we found this design flood is less than our capacity, then we try to augment this capacity, then some kind of breaching structures or which are more related to what we call this dam safety aspect. So we'll not go into details of the safety aspect, but There is one interesting graph. It is being proposed here recently. So what we are trying to here, like when we are designing those, we derive into three categories: small, medium, large, and based on these 100-year SPS and PMP plan. So instead of that, the design plan what is recommend or what is proposed, what we should use, this basically concept of this flood risk event. So it is basically what try to plot these flood events and we estimate this consequence and do an analysis based on consequence without dam failure and with there is a dam failure. So at some point they will cross and they will be at same value. So we should select that. However, there are some reservations about this approach, but this can be one approach where we try to incorporate our risk in our analysis. Now, what we generally doing to manage these kinds of risk? So basically, our standard approach is basically construction of defense, flood defense. Basically, this is nothing but our generally this embankment or flood protection wall. Sometimes the reservoir also acts as a flood moderation. So all these structural measures basically those are very widely practiced or very widely constructed across various parts in our country. The next step is our basically cropping and recovery domain, where basically this flood forecasting and warning that also being followed very extensively. The next part is the residual risk, what we call this. After that also there will be some high floods and some basically this is in the adaptive domain. So floodplain joining and all sort of regulations comes into this, where we are still lagging as a country and there have been various initiatives or in case to base this is coming into the mainstream. Now, when we try to analyze those aspects in that situation, we try to take how this actually flood phenomenon is happening and we try to mitigate or try to manage or reduce at each stage. Let's consider this as a simple example of a river and flood. Now it comes, one source is there, what could be sea or in our case, let's say river and there is high discharge coming. And what are the pathways that can watch how this water can come to our residence area? If there is an embankment, it may overtop that embankment, or there may be breaching, or there may be damage of this or breaking in some part of this embankment, and water will come to this residential area or property, human property. So these are basically what we call this receptor. Sometimes those are human, house, vehicle, industry, our livestock. So all kinds of these are different receptors and their susceptibility or what we call these consequences to a particular flood is different and we require to have these kinds of our what we call this RTN like depth and what could be the damage that is the basically impact for each kinds of variety, these kinds of cost we require to estimate, which is not only a job of what we call engineering, its economic and social aspect is there, but this has to be there if we want to estimate this risk in a holistic way. Now, a simple example, what I will be showing here. So, let's say here we will try to understand what are the role of the various structural and non-structural measures what we have discussed in 2-3 slides. So let's say this is one river basin which flowing through, let's say 3 states, like I have, let's say upper part is upper state, middle state and then lower state. It has 3 states. If we look at this estimated annual damage or flood risk, what we call this upper risk, it is 8.97 million rupees per year. Similarly, there is a little bit high this what we call this in the middle state, and in this lower state again it is high. In this total for the whole river basin is 276 million rupees per year. And so what are the existing? You can see these are basically some kinds of urban area, and these are some embankment. This dotted one, these are embankment of the river. So this is the present status. So now if we want to reduce that, we see this risk associated with flood for this basin is very high, or this is not acceptable, and we want to reduce it. So what measure we can take, and how this can be taken? Like this, each states, what we say, like our Indian condition, different states are there. So each state can take some measures. At the same time, like Central Water Commission or a centralized river basin organization, they may also take some initiatives to reduce their risk. So what we do here, let's see, or let's consider these 8 possible measures that can be taken, or that can be considered for reducing the flood risk. Now let's say this 1 and 2 are taken by our upper state. What one needs to do? So this is basically meant to reduce the flood. One dam can be constructed here, and a large reforestation in the eastern branch. So these two measures can be taken by our upper state. One is they want to construct a dam and large scales of reforestation activity. And at this middle state, what they want to do here is establish a wetland, because wetlands are as a what we call sponge, or like they can absorb the flood and release gradually. So instead of embankment, they want to reconnect that to their wetlands and protect their town or urban center with a selective or like a proper embankment on that side also, allowing flooding in some other part of their states. Then, like our last state here is the lower state, they are also want to build a retention area here, so that temporarily water can be stored here, and then protection of their city with embankment. So these protection or embankment are generally done by each state and every aspect. And what central organization, or like centrally what they want to do is to establish a flood forecasting and warning for the whole basin. So for the whole basin, if a flood forecasting mechanism is installed, so that can be worked and that can be managed at a centralized way for the whole basins, and the information can be disseminated to each state. So that is done centrally. Similarly, like flood proofing, educational training, and these like activities also can be done at centrally. Now, if you want to analyze how they are going to affect the flood risk, or how they are, we can study them one by one. I'll try to explain this very briefly. So detailed computational procedure would be quite lengthy, but let's say look at a particular case. Like in the first case, we want to construct or evaluate the impact of construction of a dam in the upper western branch, and we can always estimate what could be the cost of that construction of that dam. Now we want to estimate what could be the benefit we will be getting due to construction of that dam. So obviously what happens, like in this upper state, the previous total loss was 8.97 million rupees. So you can see, let's say for a particular return period, it has this says discharge and accidents probability. So at a particular return period, the discharge was, let's say at this particular probability, discharge is high here, Then after construction of dam, it can be regulated. So basically this discharge is reduced. So at the same probability, the amount of flood or hazard quantity, basically in this case we can say this is hazard, is reduced. So this is the basically discharge and exceedance probability. This curve is changed. And at this point this water level versus discharge remains same, because this is stage discharge curve is the rating curve, what we say, what at a particular discharge, what would be the water level in the river, that will be remain constant because they are not changing. Similarly, we are not considering any urbanization or that kind of aspect. So at a particular water level, what could be the damage? That also has not changes in these basins, but there may be, we can say in the vicinity there could be some changes, but again these are not changing. But however, only one thing is changing, that is the hazard itself. This probability, at a given probability, this magnitude of flood has been reduced with construction of the dam. So now, summarizing these three curves, we can estimate what could be the damage with respect to the probability. So what we gain by construction of this dam, if we see area under these two curves, this intersection part. So this is the basically what we call the area under this is basically our net gain. So previously in this case, if we take the area, it was 8.97, and now with this rate, this area what would be 5.17. So that is our basically net gain is subtraction of these two. So then we also can estimate what would be our cost benefit ratio of that particular intervention. Now with this, we can evaluate our each intervention and what is its impact on each states or each part, like here, upper, middle, and as a basin as a whole. And then we can select our proper, what we call mix of or one or two or three measures. We can select and prioritize them. Now, apart from this next part, what we are discussing or will be discussing about this is floodplain journey, and we have also carried out some case studies, so that we'll be discussing. So this also, again, there were some flood planning concept was there, but in practice it was not there. But recently in 2016, if you look, this floodplain was defined like say once in the 100 years, particularly for Ganga and its tributary. And some work has been carried out. This is from Haridwar to now and in various stretches. And at least these floodplain were demarcated and notified. So here you can see the discharge or this flood magnitude or flood hazard at each return period are also given. However, this implementation or to converting these floodplains in ground is a challenging task. In this case, what we are given is the site is located in the this is somewhere what we call Taj Mahal is there. So upstream of is here located in the Agra area. So what we have been given here is there was some case and what could be the means urbanizations is there and peoples are moving towards the river. So how in that case we can identify this floodplain and how this can be carried out. So in this case, what we see, if we do a flood frequency analysis, so there are a high flood in 1978 was there. So it comes out to be like a very high flood of 233 years. We want to do that for 100 years. Now somehow we have agreed because of this particular nature of this case. So in 2010, there was a flood which comes about 79-year return period if we go under the frequency. And in that year, if you look at the rainfall, and this shows the water level. So these were the plot with highest water level. So in this case, you can see there is no rainfall here. So in that area, in Agra, there was no rainfall, but the discharge was coming due to the heavy rainfall from the upstream area and upstream catchment. So that also indicates that we can, if you go for a remote sensing satellite data, so we can get lot of cloud-free images. So that also we can get, and we took that. So based on that, with some flood frequency and little bit of our modeling, and using those past satellite image, we can get this extent of our flooding or what was the river flooding in that period of time. And with the help of GIS, then we can mark those in our ground, because after that, in 10 years or more than 7-8 years, people have moved into the floodplains, and these grounds are also sometimes raised. So it is very difficult at that condition to justify whether that is a floodplain or not. But if you want to study that, you can do some kind of modeling and past historical satellite image, and that can be identified those areas. But again, this also has a lot of challenges. Like I have said, this rapid development, sometimes like construction of some upstream work or some kind of river training work, then that is again going to changes. Then what the design flood or what the flood we have been estimating, with addition of new data set into that also keeps on changing, and this topography is also changing. So in that case, there is a concept what we try to introduce, this floodway or buffer zone, and that what also we have recommended here again for a buffer zone. So that comes not only from means purely from imagination or from our side. If you look at our previous national water policy guideline, there was in the point there was to means point to look into this conservation of river corridor in water bodies. So, and in this I have taken again for example, you can find detail about that. I think PPT is shared with participants. So it talks of a like flood or river corridor. You can see this river corridor is sometimes with a buffer. Sometimes it is inside this our flood hazard zone or flood prone area, and sometimes it's beyond that also. So this concept can be sometimes looked into for putting our or sustainable way of managing our rivers. Then another thing what we are still missing or it is difficult to address also, here I have taken this, again you can refer that it's looked into the experience from advanced countries, European, US, Japan, is how flood is being managed. So one map here it is shown, this hatch line is what it basically shows these areas what is benefit from a flood defense, or if you construct one like embankment, some area is protected from flooding. If embankment is not there, that area would have been flooded. So if we try to means differentiate or try to highlight those areas, then that will gives a wider perspective to our flood risk area and flood management. Now coming into some parts of aspects of this, what we call this climate change. So as you will be dealing with more details in these other lectures. So whatever it says, it talks about like increasing in heavy precipitation, tropical cyclones, like these parameters. Then apart from this, if you look at this figure, you might have been seen it many times in other lectures maybe. So what it talk about a 10-year event with 1-day precipitation that occurs once in 10 years. So how that has been changing? Like it has here, you can say the probability of almost 1, then it is increasing. So 10-year of event that is increasing, maybe it is occurring 2.7 times from one time. So that's how it keeps on changing. So that is one of the input which causes flood is changing. Then if you look into little bit deeper into that, it says how wet and dry are like changing, like river flooding is definitely going to change, and that is also increasing. Heavy precipitations. So if you can see on an average, we can say these are sometimes 10% or 50% increasing. But this increase of 10% like in the precipitation, and how that is going to be converted into discharge, and how that finally going to means in terms of water level, how much rise in the water level, that need to be studied again for a case by case basis. Then again, just here I am trying to show one example here. This is one tributary of Mahanadi upstream of Hirakud Reservoir. So what it shows this is like our general what we do in flood frequency analysis without considering any climate change or stationarity, non-stationarity. So in this case, like we have estimated our recent period flood. Then with some changes or whatever be the certain increases in the rainfall, how this is going to change. Like if you and compare those two, what a 50-year recent period flood here, you can see using our what we call this projected scenario, and if it that compared to our present or historical record, sometimes a 50-year in this record be more than 100-year little period flood. So that aspects has to be also checked into. Then what happens then these kinds of changes are superimposed in our rainfall runoff modeling, and we see how this discharge are changing. So with climate change, let's say 100 years, how this discharge magnitude is changing. Then again, if we translate that into a hydrodynamic or river flood modeling, then what could be the change in the water level? So here we can see like it was for 50 centimeter to 85 centimeter in case of 50-year and 100-year return period. We consider those aspects of climate change. So that again, this is not a means definitive, because what projection you have been used or we have used is subjected to uncertainty. So this is basically one kind of another parameter or another uncertainty which we should look in designing any flood protection wall in this stretch. So we should provide some cushion like say 50 centimeter to 85 centimeter for future scenario. Again, this I have shown one in this is one station of Haryana. So it shows the intensity duration frequency curve. If you see, this does not show a means like climate change projected scenario here. Here this data was available from 1970 to 2007. And what we have been doing here is we have sliced them into three graphs. One is from 1970 to 1990, then 1990 to 2007, and this green one is for the whole data set. Here you can see what the intensity, what we are getting for 1 hour in 2 hours. Those are, you can see significant variation in the IDF curve. However, like say 3 hours, 6 hours, there is no such variation. You can see in both 5-year and you can say 50-year return period. So you can say if you look at this 1 day rainfall, you might miss these kinds of changing pattern in our rainfall. So this has to be considered, particularly how this hourly rainfall is going to change. This again, just for comparison, I have shown similar patterns have been obtained in elsewhere and with this projected climate scenario also. Now this part I will just focus one example how this concept of stationary we have studied. This we have studied in our Uttarakhand, this upper portion of the Ganga basin here. So these are very in the mountain. These are some kind gauging stations, and the annual maximum discharge data was there. So these data are again subjected to some kind of secrecy. So the x-axis has been removed here, but this shows how the discharge data is there. So this first we did any standard approach, like we do a flood frequency analysis and we estimate these return period plots. Now what happens, we do some kind of checking or looking into the data set, what the trend is there or how this data set are behaving. So we can see, let's say it's at the Rudraprayag one site here, you can see. So at different statistical significance levels, there was a significant, statistically significant increasing trend is there. Now the question is, non-stationary is obviously in the data set and how to deal with that. Now concluding or augmenting that, or what we can say, concluding it as a natural variability or climate change effect, that is other aspect, but how to deal with those and how we should take care of that, we'll discuss here. So in this case, means along with this stationary approach, we try to study some kind of non-stationary frequency analysis, and we estimate or best fitted what we took out is a non-stationary model, non-stationary Gumbel model, and we try to compare that with our previous observations of stationary. Here you can say basically all the, what we say in this patch is all this yellow, inside this yellow mark, these are basically against stationary data set but estimated using various methods like GBAD with method of maximum likelihood, then Bayesian approach, L movement. So what frequency whatever we are using here, and these two are like for near future 2050 and 2100. So these two for future projections or futures in the time scale. So these two graphs are there. Then if you see here, what I just want to highlight, let's say we are using only this Gumbel method, generally what we use. So here you can see definitely there is going to be at 100 year too much uncertainty, or you can say away from future scenario. But if we look at, if you are taking or considering the large scale candidate distributions, other distributions also into consideration, so you might be taking some aspect of this uncertainty into your calculations. So like if you look at this case, this L moment method, what instead of this Gumbel or GB, it advocate for a like GLO as the best fitted distribution, this blue one. So it is almost similar to that here, you can say, for a non-stationary model. So that part also plays an important role in what distributions you are selecting and how you have been, these parameters of their distributions is being estimated. Again, if you just simply compare how they are changing, like a 50-year return period in future, it maybe becomes a 25-year return period. That means we will get those events very frequently. So similarly, the case with directly dealing with, instead of discharge and rainfall as an input, we try to do again for a small catchment here. So what I want to highlight here, what result we have got and what you can see for 2-year and 5-year return period rainfall, we are seeing that there is a decreasing trend or decreasing in our estimated rainfalls. However, like a higher return period like 50 and 100, we can see those are increasing value. Then again, what I want to show here in this graph is these are basically uncertainty band here. Sometimes we does not talk about these in our reports or results, but this also says when we look into these kind of data sets and we means project like rainfall value or a design discharge value. So up to what quantile or up to how this confidence band has to be there. So this has to be read with our results properly. Now, based on that, again we studied how that's going to behave or how that is going to impact our estimated plots and the design of various bridges. You can see the net rise or net increase in this water level, what we estimate is around 70 centimeter, 15 centimeter like this. So inside this trees, it poses no challenge. But in the downstream, there are some embankments in the urban area, and there is a very likely chance that these are going to be overtopped with such rise or such kinds of increase in our river discharge. Now this curve, what I showed in the first example, I will just go through it, how this climate change part is going to happen. So let's say I will just try to say what we have discussed previously in one example. This basically what we are generating generating return period from flood using flood frequency analysis. I am summarizing here, and this is basically our stage discharge curve. So the stage discharge curve, anyway, if there is not much sedimentation in the river over a time or no more physical intervention, the stage discharge curve in a river will remain constant. Similarly, this is stage versus damage, like maybe extent of flooded area or extent of agricultural loss or people affected. Again, if there is no much change in land use or urbanization is not there, it is going to be almost constant. And combination of these things is our basically damage curve. Like say, if we have these three curves, 1, 2, 3, then we can construct this fourth one, like going to come medium, then going this way, then again we can estimate that. Then here where we curve the same probability here, this is basically same probability here, so we can pick that point. So this way we try to construct this standard curve. Then due to the climate change, there can be two kinds of effect might be possible here. Let's say for this example, here I have what I have put. Instead of changing this discharge or this flood frequency curve that we have seen here, let's say some kinds of our people migrated towards the river. So what happens now? The stage versus damage has been increased. Means now this for same discharge, we have lot of more people susceptible to flood. So like if we consider this, so what happens basically now this has been increased to this point. So this yellow line. So again, if some increase in this damage, so our loss also will be increased. So this point again at same probability, our loss has been increased. So this area is basically our increase in total flood risk due to such kind of urbanizations or some kind of changes in our floodplain. Again, similarly, if we consider these changes with respect to climate, so here instead of our this earlier what we call stationary flood frequency curve may have a non-stationary one, or this may be generated from climate change projects. So here we may shift for like low return period, there may not be shift, but at higher or low probability floods, we can have a considerable difference. What we have seen here. So even then now if we'll go through this, then we will be able to construct this our damage curve differently, and now we can segregate those what additional risk in the river basin is due to climate change. So this way we can keep on doing this exercise. Now then how to select those, or how to recommend what we are going to do. This again I have put one example what we are planning to do, but till now it was not materialized. It was a case in the Maharashtra in 2019. There was a high flood in the Krishna basin. So what we want to propose, we want trying to do was like how much invest we can do. Like we can always estimate what is the investment that is obviously increasing. We can go on increasing our investment in construction of embankments, height, then some kind of diversion, so that required cost, and obviously that will reduce the total damage. So if we took both of them together, this basically total cost. So we can have our lowest point and we may choose. So these sometimes may be helpful in deciding economically what is efficient flood protection measure. Now, so before concluding, I just want to highlight, so if you're looking to consider or looking to mitigate this climate change and incorporate that in our practice, so a lot of research has to be done to showcase that and bringing that into our standards. And standards in this end, what is the standards we have discussed initially about this estimation of design plots. So those have to be relooked and they may be required to adequately address that aspect. So that is obviously there. So we have to review of the hydrology not in case of design plot only. Basically, this climate change, non-stationary regulation in terms of our uh, structures. So that has to be done. Then, apart from all these things, when we talk about this risk management, till now what mostly we are doing is flood management or amount of flood water. So then other aspect like population, life loss, estimated annual damage. So this also comes into play. Now, when we again further move towards sustainable or risk management, then we have to be sustainable in terms of what we have discussed in the last slide was about economic. There may be cases of like social or environmental more focused on that. So those two aspects also or many additional has to be taken. So thank you. Then I will now go through any, I think already it is 1 hour, so we'll look for any questions.
So thank you very much, sir. I think I can see two questions in the chat box. If you can, I'll read them out.
Okay.
Okay, the first question says, how can we identify or map the flood exposure of slums or squatter settlements using geospatial data or techniques?
Okay, so there are two ways of doing that. So one is only based on remote sensing data. So then we have to look for one past flood event when the flood is considerably high or a significant flood and it has inundated those areas. Then we have to look for maybe cloud-free remote sensing images in optical bands, which are like Sentinels you can get freely or Catosat also. But sometimes if cloud is there, then we may have to look into our active remote sensing or some kind of radar sat image, and using those we estimate the flood extent using a satellite approach. Then we have to look into how urbanization has taken place, or we can have a land use classification of these slums and how they are developed. And then by combination of them, we can now estimate how much slum area is getting affected by the flood.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think there is a second question. It's a bit long. It says, instead of terminating revised design storm estimation, you can check it in the chat box now. It's a very long one.
Okay. I'll go through that.
Yeah.
Hope instead of terminating revised design storm estimation due to climate change, in case of snow-fed areas, the increased rainfed area near glacier, rectangular storm and salty even weighted to get. It's okay. So, but if you that is right, if you are particularly means interested in a catchment which has considerable snowfall or glacial area, so the both parts plays a role because rainfed and snowmelt also, because we are estimating this discharge in our case at very downstream of this hilly area like Uttarakhand in the case of Ganga. So this percentage of snowfall is very even less than 1% in that case. So we have not given that due consideration, but if that is a small catchment where this large part of our catchment is contributed by snowmelt runoff, then both aspects, these changes in the snow-fed area also need to be duly considered. That's right.
Okay. We have one more question just now. Okay.
Most of the designs are inadequate. Yeah, so that what we have been seeing in our case in recently, we have also carried out some studies, but that has been due to 2-3 factors. First case is obviously what we can attribute to climate change, but there are other aspects like when some dam is constructed 30 years back or 40 years back, the methodology for estimating the floods at that time or designs are based on sometimes empirical formula, and whatever data has been used also sometimes those are limited. So there was some deficiency, can say, at that time also. Obviously, whenever as long as we get more data, we can always get a better representation of that. So what I generally try to emphasize that in those aspects, or when we do analysis, if we do some with our analysis with limited data or some kind of empirical relationship, if we try to emphasize or highlight what the uncertainty in there or what is the confidence in those estimates, so then it gives a broader sense, and so in this design time we can take that into consideration.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. There is one question. It says how to manage or mitigate flash floods which come due to monsoon.
So, like we have talked about this flash floods. So flash floods are basically what we get in our mountain area. So in this mountain area or in this warning time, or what we say, the modeling of flash flood is in a rainfall runoff modeling and then estimating inundation extent. So that is not very practicable in terms of timely issuing the alert or warning. So in that case, there is a concept of flash flood guidance system, what we call FFG. So in that case, during the past events and some with historical flood modeling, it is tried to estimate the threshold value of rainfall, means above which rainfall this area will be getting a flood or a high flood. So this threshold value for each subcatchment or very small localized area is estimated, and then whenever there is a high rainfall warning or prediction, that crosses that threshold level, which is called basically flash flood guidance system. So then the flood warning is issued. So that way those area were. In mountain area, this flood forecasting for flash flood works that way.
Okay, thank you. Sir, there is one more question. In Brahmani River Basin, which tributary contribute more discharge, Sunk or South Koil?
So that basically what happens if you look at this, I don't know if he is from that area. So one dam is located, the Sunk and Koil are two rivers, and they merge, and the river Brahmani then names. So in the South Koil or Sunk river, what we call, so one dam is there, so that supplies water to basically Mandira Dam that supplies water to Rourkela city and steel plant. The dam is also owned by steel plant authority. So in that case, this water in that river is somehow regulated, but however this other tributary, that water is not regulated. So that's the case. So that's where when we regulated flow, this flood peak is sometimes regulated to Mandira Dam.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. Are there any other questions?
Yes, sir, I have.
Yeah, please.
Sir, while flood frequency analysis, to which return, if suppose we are working on a flood inundation, sir, which return period we can consider, sir, which will be feasible, 25 or 100? I mean,
basically there are means as a regulation or as a floodplain zoning, what it is recommended to go for a 100-year return period flood. But if you want,
sir, but while considering 100 years return period, maybe a few more water retaining structures may be constructed during that river, maybe, and accordingly it may change the risk and all.
no, there are two aspects to what you are getting mixed. One is what we are estimating return period flood, and another is our design life. Means like if you want to protect a risk or what we say for a particular stretch, you want to study the flood risk for next 25 years. So then you have to think those changes. That is basically called the design life. Like if you are designing a dam or designing a industrial area which has a design life of let's say 25 years only, generally any industrial area has a in
Yes.
economic 25 years only, but you have to consider a 100-year return period. What 100-year return period flood is basically 1% chance in a given year. It does not say that in next 100 years that flood will not exceed. It only says that there is only 1% chance of accident.
Sir, sir, one more question, sir. Sir, that rainfall frequency analysis you have shown, that you have taken monthly.
No, that was 1 day maximum rainfall because we are dealing with this flood, so we consider this 1 day maximum, annual 1 day maximum rainfall.
Okay. Sir, one more question. Sir, in flood frequency analysis, various methods are there, right? Various distributions. From that, which is the best to consider? I mean, which strategy?
There are a lot of, if you go to any textbook or
Or
manual,
so many
so
are
there
there.
are, yeah, so how to select a distribution, like there are case statistics and other criteria are there based on that, like movement ratio, ZI statistics. So a lot of criteria are there. So using those selection techniques, you can select what is the best fitted probability distribution.
Sir, I mean, flood frequency analysis and rainfall frequency analysis, both can be done in point of view to find out the flood inundation, which you have to consider, sir. I mean,
If you have discharge data, then
yeah,
it is always recommended to use that, because if you are using rainfall data, then eventually you have to convert that to discharge data using some kind of rainfall property. So if you
sir.
have readily available discharge data, then you should go for your discharge data or flood frequency analysis instead of a rainfall frequency analysis.
Sir, while coming to rainfall frequency analysis, if rainfall is a gridded data, then sir?
Yeah, so when we say gridded data, like all your climate projections also comes in a gridded data. So you
Yes,
have
yes,
to
sir.
understand gridded data is gridded data, that is not a point data. In the sense that rainfall of that variable is spread over certain square meter or square kilometer of area rather
Sir,
than a single point.
sir.
So when you do further analysis, rainfall modeling or any analysis, you have to take it that way. Means as a catchment, you may have to, or even if you are using a graded model like WIC model, so your rainfall will be always converted into graded rainfall. Even if you want to use point data, that had to be converted into graded data.
Sir. Sir, the recent curve you have shown in the PPT, sir, that cost of damage and all, that model is freely available or is a coded model or what?
Actually, those are very like area specific and that are subjectivity. So in practice, like in research domain or only that way, this is being generally used. In practice, it is very difficult to recommend. Like 4 feet of water will damage a house, that may damage or may not damage. So there are sometimes ambiguities there, but you can use some standard curves are there, so you can use them. Like for a agriculture field with paddy, that may withstand like half a meter of flooding, but wheat may not even withstand that much of water. So like variety wise, crop variety, you can use those curves which are available.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. You have given a lot of information on flood frequency, rainfall frequency analysis and all. If there are any more
I have one
questions-
question.
Yeah, please go ahead. Last question.
Sir, can you explain about non-stationarity in the case of urban areas?
Okay, so in case of urban area, this one what we generally understand by non-stationary is that means this
Okay.
there is a trend in our data set, means either it may be decreasing, increasing, it may be step change or some kind of changes in the mean value we can say. So there are some kind of statistical analysis like Mann-Candel test, all these things we can means say how is our data set. Then particularly in urban area, there is a concept of like urban heat island concept. So that cause localized, even not a large scale changes, that localized changes in precipitation is there when some area is getting urbanized. In some part of like this convective heated kind of the urban area will be some kind of high thermal energy or high heat, so it have a convective effect. So localized high precipitation might be observed in your data set, and due consideration you should provide if you are working particularly in urban area.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay, I think it is already.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. And I think we're getting late for the next session. We'll break here for 5 minutes and then we'll join back again for the next session that is on statistical analysis and for climate change studies. I'd like to thank Dr. Patra sir for his valuable time and lecture. Thank you.